STEMPrime Researchcast.
Hi, and welcome to the first episode of the STEMPrime Researchcast. I'm Thomas Wright. I am the founder and lead software engineer at Phobos Technologies, and I am the creator of the AI STEM Drive. All right, now on to the meat of this episode. Okay, I'd like to start with a few thought experiments. Each one is designed to accentuate a particular key concept. The first one I like to call the body economic. I recently wrote an article on Medium and uploaded it. If you want to look for it, I'll leave a link in the description, but it's called When at Long Last We Wake. Consider the human body, all of the systems, organs, tissues, all the separate cycles that go on continually throughout the entire body, each having their own specific purpose and their own part to play in the function of the body. What happens when something gets a little off, or when something stops working altogether? By definition, humanity is not quite a superorganism. The reason we don't fully qualify being that single individuals can survive for extended periods of time. However, we are moving into the realm of the superorganism. Now, I'm going to veer from convention and coin a new term, specific to sentient species with an awareness of themselves and other people. Supraorganism optima, meaning essentially the same thing as a superorganism with one essential difference. Instead of the challenging qualifier being survival, let us say no single organism can reach and maintain self-actualization for an extended period of time without others. Now, why did I bring that up? Well, let's get back to the body for a minute. You have all of these systems, all of these parts doing their individual jobs. Now, let's introduce an economy into the human body. I know this is a bit of a stretch, but this is a thought experiment, and it does accentuate a very specific point key to this particular conversation that we're having. Okay, now we have all these organs running around. We've got different tissues, different cells, and we have an economy in here, a currency. The heart is a supplier of blood, and it pumps blood throughout the body. But now it's the heart with a service to offer, and it charges for its service. Now, let's say the brain also. It's the internet of the body, so that's its service. The stomach and the intestines digest and provide energy. That's its service. So what happens when some part of the body eventually doesn't make enough money to pay its bills? Well, the services are going to get shut off, and that particular part of the body isn't going to receive the necessary nutrients and utilities that it needs to survive and to continue to contribute back to the body's economy. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is a stupid example, I want you to really consider what I'm talking about here. The body is a collection of different organs, different units, different systems, each one doing a separate job, each job vital to the survival of the body. But isn't that what we are? Aren't we just separate individual systems, each supporting and contributing to the economy and to the world at large in our own unique individual way? Whether we simply sell tickets at a movie theater or we're the President of the United States, the fact of the matter is we are doing the same thing each little system within the body is doing and contributing back to society in some specific way. Now, as I stated in the Medium article, it wouldn't be too long before things started to go awry within a body if it had an economy. In fact, one would be hard-pressed to even believe that the body would be capable of surviving for an extended period of time. Okay, so that is the body economic. I think it's pretty obvious what I'm trying to accentuate here, what I'm really trying to portray to the viewer. Let's move on to the village. Okay, now for the village, we're going to imagine a little valley set between a couple of mountains. And in this valley, there's going to be a small village. let's say it's a population of about 500. Now at the top of one of the mountains, there's a large reservoir, and it provides water to the entire village. The water trickles down the mountain, goes down throughout the village, and spreads into multiple different streams until it passes all the way through. Now the stream is a natural resource, and it freely flows down the mountain through the village, and the resource is taken as it is needed. The farmers plant their crops along the riverside, and when people need to bathe, they go and get buckets full of water, bring it back to their bathing house, and take a bath. Water is extracted from the river and streams whenever it's needed. One day, one of the village elders takes a small select group of workers, goes up to the mountain, and constructs a dam that shuts off the entire reservoir. After the construction, they construct several water towers throughout the village and the foothills. When everybody came to the village elder and said, "What's this all about? We need our water to grow our crops, to bathe, to wash our dishes," whatever the case may be, the village elder then said, "Okay, I've got a new system. This is what we're going to do. This is how things are going to work from here on out. We're going to have a building in the middle of town, and we're going to call it the reserve, the water reserve." So the village elder explains that we now have credits. We have 1 gallon credits, 5 gallon credits, 10 gallon credits, 50 and 100 gallon credits. And you can use these credits as if they were water. Now, because water is now a scarce resource, we can use it as a means to persuade people to do things for us and to be persuaded to do work for others. We exchange the credits, and when you do need water, you can take your credit into the reserve and exchange it for that particular amount of water. So overnight, this massive change begins to crop up all over the village. Banks pop up. You have crime. People are stealing other people's credits. People are losing jobs. Work suddenly becomes an issue. Instead of just working to contribute to the whole, now you have to find work in order to receive money so you can contribute to the whole. Credit also becomes a thing. People decide that they can loan somebody a certain amount of credits, and in order to get back what they feel is essentially their right to ask for, they ask for a percentage more than what they originally loaned them. Credit institutions crop up all over the place, and the idea of taking out a loan becomes a normal mode of living. Now we have a completely different method of distribution. Instead of the water feeding the crops, the farmers taking the crops to the cooks taking the crops and cooking it into soups, breads, what have you, and then distributing it to everybody for mealtime. You now have gateways as the progression in distribution proceeds. So the gateway between the water and the farmer is the reserve. The gateway between the farmer and the cooks is an exchange of credits. The gateway between the cooks and everybody eating is another exchange of credits. You have now added multiple steps for this system to work effectively. Now, you're not just dealing with resources and managing resources. You're dealing with the resources, the management of the resources, and the individual valuations of every single exchange along the way. So if we look at the village before and the village afterwards, you will notice that about 30% of all manual labor and all resources go into sustaining the economy that they decided to now have. When originally the free flow of energy and resources just took its natural path. Sure, you can divert and aim and manipulate that flow, but it hasn't been halted, and it hasn't caused so many gateways and so many stagnant points where things come to a halt. So that's the village, and hopefully it gives you a good idea of what exactly is happening in an economy. Okay, now we're going to do bit of a different story. We're going to kind of pull back and look at what would happen if a small group of people got stranded on an island. I've just been calling this the island. Okay, now before we move on to the island, I want you to consider that the people of the village were still somewhat primitive. They didn't have the stock market, they don't have iPhones and cell phones, they don't have tablets or computers, and they don't have a network. This is an important point to remember as we talk about the island. Okay, the island. A group of about 50 people get shipwrecked on an island. Now, as they're trying to get rescued and putting out fires and constructing large signs for planes that are flying overhead, they decide to delegate different responsibilities. You have the guys that go out and hunt animals, and then you have the guys and girls, I apologize, that go out and acquire food. And then you have the people that build huts, and you have the people that cook, and then you have the people that have some medical training, so they're the doctors of this little group of people. Now, it's a small group of people, so it's fairly manageable. You don't really have to have money in this situation, and most people wouldn't. You would probably have trade at some level, but for the most part, everybody would want to contribute back to the society because everybody wants to get rescued. Now you might want to ask, well, if 50 people could do it, can't everybody do it? Isn't this something we could just scale up on a level where everybody could just do that? Everybody just pitch in and contribute their part and everybody function without the bottleneck and problems that money brings? The answer is unfortunately no. The reason it's no is a bit complicated, but we have a certain level of technological advancement and certain resources and ideas we've constructed our civilization around depends on the flow of money and how money works. Another reason you can't do it are because of the three functions of money. Now, we're going to get to those in a minute, but keep that in mind. Okay, now the last thought experiment is called the City Automata. Now, cast your mind into the far future, 50 to a couple hundred years from now, where everything is automated, 100%. Everything you could ever possibly even conceive of getting paid for is being done by a machine. Now, the machines do the laundry, they do the farming, they take care of our kids, they pack our lunches, they lay the cables, they repair our buildings, everything. You don't have to do one bit of work. Now, in this future, obviously, there is no such thing as money. There couldn't be. There's no possible way you could inject money into a world like that. Now think about this just for a second. From the basic economic structure that we came from is the same sort of structure we eventually arrive at. Again, from not using money to using money to not using money. There's this area between these two polar ends of technological advancement that seems to either require the use of a currency or at some point the idea of currency has been injected into it and we just kept running with it. Now, the idea I'm going to propose is might make a few people upset, but the concept is this. Money is necessary for a certain level of technological development, but I believe through all of my research and what I've been doing here that we are at the point where we can extract the currency-driven economy and replace it with the STEM Epiconomy and run it with the AI STEM drive. Okay, now I'm a huge Star Trek fan. In Star Trek First Contact, Picard, this is a quote from Picard, I'm sure several of you know this, but he says, "The acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force in our lives. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity." Obviously, science fiction has had an incredible influence on me in the creation of the AI STEM drive. Now, both Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek as well as Ian M. Banks's Culture series have had specifically a huge impact on me, on getting this up and going. However, there is one idea that started me thinking about these ideas from an extremely young age. I was raised in a strict LDS household. And even though I am no longer Mormon, and I haven't been for about 20 years, Joseph Smith's law of consecration has always fascinated me as an idea. Now, the law of consecration is basically the idea that money post-Second Coming will be extracted and removed from the economy, from the system, and whatever anybody has, they will give to the church. And the church will be whatever distributes. Okay. Now that's pretty close to communism, and I think we all know that communism doesn't work. It's proved itself unworthy time and time again. So even though the law of consecration is more akin to communism, which the STEM drive is absolutely not, it did set my mind in motion. It got me thinking about the possibility that a currency-free economic system might actually be a viable option. Now, throughout my career, I ran into corruption time and time again. One instance, I heard the CEO of a pharmaceutical company from the other side of a closed door, he had no idea I was in that particular office, explain that the trick was to get your product on the shelves and sold as quickly as possible, so that by the time the lawsuits start rolling in, you would have enough money to handle all the lawsuits and still come off with a profit. I also watched our CTO get fired because she made a comment about the fact that an inexperienced call center girl was suddenly promoted overnight to be the CEO's personal secretary. This same company, who catered to people with different medical conditions, continually asked us to cut corners that resulted in illegally storing medical and financial information in our databases without encrypting anything, just to save the bottom line. Another company I worked for denied the American Atheists organization billboard space for their convention. Now, I had attended that convention that year, and I talked to David Silverman, who was a president of the American Atheists. The company I had worked for was heavily LDS, and I told him that they denied his billboard space because they did not want to offend the locals. Now, I'm not going to say any names, however, suffice it to say that I'm pretty sure that's not the reason he got denied billboard space. It was not an offensive billboard, but it was offensive to their personal beliefs. Now, for the most part, working there was great. They were great people. I actually liked working there. But when you want to talk about corruption, I mean, that particular instance is like, just, you almost don't want to call it corruption, but it is on some level, has a corrupt element to it. Now, no matter where I worked, there was corruption just continually going on some level. Most of it was highly illegal and blatant in your face. Most companies I've worked for have been corrupt on some level. The majority of them were blatantly corrupt. I mean, asking us face to face to do something that is obviously immoral and probably on some level illegal. It's just the way it has always been. It seems you can't find an actual company that has grown to a specific size and maintain their moral code. The bottom line will not allow it. Now, all of these experiences along with the fact that money seems to be heavily related to most of our world's most frustrating and largest issues, such as political and corporate corruption, hunger, problems with our educational system, medicine, medical practices, medicines, pharmaceuticals, insurance. Crime is directly tied to money. Jails and prisons, except for crimes of passion, jails and prisons, they're being called correctional facilities, but they do nothing of the sort. Now, throughout my research, I've come to a few separate conclusions about our world. Okay, now up front, this may sound a little off to you, but I intend on proving both of these statements throughout these first several episodes. One is that money is not the root of all evil, and I'll explain that shortly. The second is that money and/or any system of artificially maintained currency and variable valuation hijacks two fundamental natural systems. The first system that currency hijacks is the natural interplay, flow, and exchange of space, time, energy, and matter. That's STEM. So much so that the true value of STEM are reduced by up to 80,000%, and we'll go through that as well. And the natural flow of nature's fundamental currencies of space, time, energy, and matter are dangerously impeded. The second system that currency hijacks is humanity's internally developed sense of survival. Our survival instincts and perception of what survival is has been heavily warped by the several thousand years it has been in use. Okay, now this brings up a quick point I'd like to make. Currency and money. Okay, currency is, aside from the wheel, the oldest and least evolved technology in use today. Yeah, sure, we've devised a bunch of ways to transfer and trade and use money quickly and efficiently. However, at its core, it is still the same ancient concept developed by primitive humans thousands of years ago. Now, in order to understand why money is so easily abused, I developed the theory of ideophysical dynamism. Okay, we're going to have another couple really quick thought experiments, but this is just to highlight what ideophysical dynamism is and ideophysical coupling. Now, when I was a kid, there was an old Calvin and Hobbes comic where Calvin and Hobbes made a little cardboard time machine, and they went on a Calvin and Hobbes-esque time machine adventure, and it was a pretty enjoyable comic at that time. Still pretty enjoyable, I'm sure. But it illustrates a really important idea that may seem to be, like it's an intuitive concept, but I've found that there are a lot of concepts and ideas out there that we all think are intuitive, but are so intuitive and so fundamental to how we perceive and interact with reality that we forget it's even a concept and we don't pay attention to it. So ideophysical dynamism, it obviously, ideo, idea, physical, the physical world, dynamism, or the interplay between the world of the idea and the world of the physical, of our physical reality. So say you get a cardboard box, you write time machine across the side of it in big black permanent marker, you draw a flux capacitor and stick it to the back, and you put a little date selection panel at the front of the box. Obviously, this is not going to work. A kid might have some fun playing around with it, pretending that he's traveling through time, but we all know that that time machine is not taking you anywhere, and it's not doing anything spectacular. The reason why it doesn't is because the actual concepts and theories and ideas that would be necessary to build a time machine that could actually warp and manipulate space and time and project somebody across a continuum to another specified time, place, and time and location. It's far beyond our grasp, and it just doesn't exist. There is no possible way a cardboard box and a little permanent marker is going to do that. The idea in the child's mind that created the time machine and what is actually required in the physical reality to perform that task are so radically different that it doesn't even come close to accomplishing that task. We could say the same with a broom. Unless you're a high-tech genius and you understand what you need to do to create a futuristic broom that can fly, just putting my ride across the broomstick isn't going to make it a viable method of transportation. So we have the world of idea, what our minds can come up with, these fantasies that we can create, and then you have the physical reality that you have to adhere to in order to get those ideas to work. Now, an engineer could design an engine and with very little tuning and tweaking, build an engine quickly that would actually run. So our cardboard time machine has a very low ideophysical coupling. But the engineer's engine, the engine he has in his mind, has a very high ideophysical coupling. Yeah, this is no duh. If you don't build it right, it's not going to work. But in order to analyze money, I needed to really name this thing. I needed to give it some concept I could kind of tease apart and analyze, because money has a very low ideophysical coupling. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at traffic laws for a moment. We have the physical road, we have the lights, and we have the physical cars that go on the physical road. Now, the road and the cars, high ideophysical coupling. It was conceptualized by engineers that understood how the world around us works, and they created these objects so we could use it in the physical world. But traffic laws, this is where things get a little interesting. Traffic laws have a bit higher ideophysical coupling, but not quite as high as, say, an engine. The reason is because a traffic law points to an idea that really doesn't have any other merit other than it's explaining how to use the roads and your vehicles correctly so that there aren't accidents. Now, could you run a red light and get away with it? Yes. But could you run a red light and get T-boned and seriously injured? Yes. So the traffic laws are designed to keep us safe on this physical system. Now, you can go down a rabbit hole talking about board games and the rules for the board games and all sorts of ideas and concepts when you start applying ideophysical dynamism. But let's talk about money for a second. Why does money have a low ideophysical coupling? And what does that mean specifically? Why is it bad to have a low ideophysical coupling? Well, first and foremost, systems of low ideophysical coupling have a high potential for being abused. Now, you couldn't abuse the theory of gravity because gravity is a real thing that really happens. It bends and warps space, and things adhere to the shape that space is twisted into. The only way to abuse gravity would be to manipulate it in some way, and then you're not abusing it because you're adhering to the natural fundamental concepts and construct of our world. You're actually engaging with the system that reality has in place. But systems of a low ideophysical coupling, because they aren't designed to connect and work completely with the physical reality that we live in, they have a high potential for being abused, because you can twist and torque and manipulate it all you want. So why does money have such a low ideophysical coupling? Well, it is inherent in what money is. You have a medium of exchange, correct? What the medium of exchange means is you have one thing that can represent any number of things and any value of each number of things. So it is by nature extremely liquid, and by nature has an extremely low ideophysical coupling. A good example is what happened to the stock market after COVID-19 became a real worldwide problem. The stock market plummeted. Now, if money was actually tied to the actual value of what things actually represent, or actually are, the stock market would not have crashed, because it would have had somehow a high ideophysical coupling, and those prices and ideas would not have been shifted or manipulated because of the fear that grew across the country. And when something has a low ideophysical coupling, it can be easily abused and manipulated because it is, by its very nature, easy to abuse and manipulate. It is the nature of the beast. So, is money the root of all evil? It absolutely is not. It is not the root of all evil, just as the rules for monopoly are not the root of all evil. So what is then the root of all evil? The root of all evil, from what I have discovered and observed, is when something has a low ideophysical coupling and somebody or some group of people come along and manipulate that coupling in order to benefit themselves without any regard for anybody else. That is the abuse of money. So the root of all evil is the abuse of money. Now, according to economists, money has it used to be four. It is now three basic functions. You have a medium of exchange, what we kind of talked about already, the unit of account, and a store of value. However, these three functions of money, under a STEM Epiconomy, are completely null points. It doesn't have any impact, and there is no reason to have to deal with those three issues or problems. Again, please hold any disagreement you might have at this point. I would be happy to talk about it in polite conversation, but before you just start jumping in there and attacking what I'm presenting, let's go through the entire system first. Let's talk about everything along the way. Let's complete the first several videos of the podcast, of the series, before we get into the interviews, and then we can start picking things apart. We'll eventually go over everything in extreme detail, so be patient. Okay, but it should suffice for now to say, at least, that these three functions, when compared to the STEM Epiconomy, actually diminish quality and egregiously slows down the speed of production, exchange, and distribution. It wasn't until 2017 when listening to either, I can't remember whether it was All in the Mind or Hidden Brain, but I was introduced to the self-determination theory of motivation. And it was at this point when it all hit me like a school bus. I saw the picture so clearly, and all the pieces just started kind of clicking into place. Like, I can't even explain the experience. It would be as if you took a jigsaw puzzle, shook it up, and dumped it onto the carpet and watched everything just fall perfectly into place. It was such a bizarre and surreal experience that I have really nothing to compare it to, but just take my word for it. This was the point when all of the research I had done and all of the problems and questions that I have had trying to figure out how we could possibly create an epiconomy that would function correctly, this was the point that it all just clicked. The basic psychological and sociological foundation for the AI STEM drive and the STEM epiconomy is as follows. 1. Provide for everybody's basic needs. 2. People who have had their basic needs met, given the self-determination theory of motivation, states that in order for people to be intrinsically motivated, they have to be competent, understand and know what they're doing. They have to have connection, have friends in the circle of work that they are doing. And they have to feel a sense of autonomy. They have to be able to feel confident in what they are doing. With a properly designed social structure such that top-notch education is available and distributed to everybody, no exceptions, and social motivational foci are designed to settle into the lowest possible energy states. As you might understand from thermodynamics, how things settle into any one of several specific energy states, I'm talking about creating a social structure where the lowest possible energy state is such that it clicks into an area where all the social foci and motivational foci go where we want them. We're going to get into this a little bit later. In such a structure, the natural drive to self-actualize blossoms for everybody because the 3 requirements for intrinsic motivation are met. Self-actualized people, according to Kaufman, have continued freshness of appreciation. They're accepting, they are authentic, they have an efficient perspective of reality. They approach everything with equanimity. They have purpose. They are humanitarian by their nature. And they seek peak experiences. They have good moral intuition, and they are highly creative. Now, self-actualizing people do have a deep need to give back to society in a loving and nurturing way. They don't hoard, they are not selfish, and they veer from corruption at any cost. These people, in turn, give back to society with a fire driven by intrinsic motivations, which, according to years and years of research, is far superior to any level of motivation produced by money or financial stimulation. Okay, now remember that this is a superficial overview of the STEM epiconomy, and we're not even close to finished here. So, I'm going to wrap things up for now, and next week we'll continue with the fundamental underpinnings of STEM theory. Okay, now remember the supra-organism optima, what we talked about before? In the next episode, we're going to look at artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that relates to everything we've talked about so far. So, what I will say before closing up is that any sufficiently advanced organism requires a conductor, not an electrical conductor, but as in a musical conductor. We have our central nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord, all of the nerves, the entire network of nerves that flow throughout our entire body. Without it, nothing could even be possible in as large and complex of a system as our bodies are. So if we're going to function in time as a perfect symphony of human organisms, we'll need a sort of central nervous system. Governments for a long time have sort of tried to be the hack replacement for what has obviously been the sense of what is missing. But the problem with having a government orchestrate an epiconomy is that it would fail within a matter of years, if not months. What you need is an unbiased, high-speed sensory and reactive system that can effectively and efficiently orchestrate the STEM epiconomy. And this is where the AI STEM drive comes in. Now, as all of these pieces began to kind of fit together, I began to realize that such a system would solve a lot more than just corruption. I began to suspect that if implemented properly, the AI STEM drive could kickstart post-scarcity, completely remove corruption except for some small percentage, exponentially accelerate the growth of scientific advancement and technological research, promote self-actualization, and possibly even a sort of a cohesive social actualization. Hunger and homelessness would be a thing of the past. Addiction, for the most part, would be solved. Education would become the core of everything, and corporations would turn into collectives, which would mean that corporate competition would turn into healthy cooperative competition. Pollution would become a non-issue. Prisons would actually become true correctional facilities. Such a social dynamic even opens us up to the requirements necessary to begin building megastructures. Since manpower would be at its complete max, resources really no longer have a limit except for how quickly we can pull it. And the only limit we really have is imagination and time. Think about it. Generation ships would become an actual possibility. Even a Dyson sphere would be in the realm of possible for us. The list goes on, and we're going to cover a lot more as we go, but think about it. Jobs aren't sought for their financial potential anymore, which means people will either seek the jobs they love to do, or they will find a way they can contribute to society in a way that they will be fulfilled in doing so. Nobody would care about somebody else making more money than they do, because that concept wouldn't even exist, especially in a society full of self-actualizing people. No more funding bottlenecks, so science and tech explode, and self-actualization would sweep the planet. Now, so far, science completely backs everything I have put together here. However, like I said, there's a lot more to cover. We're just scratching the surface. And so before the interviews begin, we will have thoroughly combed through the entirety of STEM theory. If you are a scientist or a professional researcher and you either would like to add to, question, criticize me, or just talk about this concept, please contact me. We can schedule an interview. No interview will be edited or kept from being posted as long as the conversation remains cordial and constructive. Now for me and this particular project, criticism is crucial to the proper advancement and correct construction of not only the STEM drive theory, but the AI STEM drive itself. I love learning, and I don't mind being corrected as long as it is truthful and it contributes to the proper functioning of the STEM epiconomy and the AI STEM drive. If you have any questions or comments, please address them to stemprimepodcast@gmail.com. Likewise, if you are interested in being interviewed and having a conversation about this, remember to put interview in the subject. Now, if this sounds too good to be true, then you're in good company. But even so, isn't this at least worth a thorough investigation? Now, I'm going to leave you with a quote by Mark Twain. Necessity is the mother of taking chances. And honestly, we are in need of a radical restructuring. Thank you for listening. Be careful out there. We'll see you next time.